The Postal Service is pleased to present 10 new forever stamps that celebrate that popular and versatile form of expression. Pinback buttons. Since their invention in 1896, pinback buttons have been used as a tool for advertising and political campaigns and to broadcast opinions on a wide variety of topics.
The pinback button, as we know it today, was invented by a company in Newark, New Jersey, by the name of Whitehead and Hogue. Millions and millions of people decided they wanted to collect buttons. They were such a novelty at the time, as well as documentary and history. In the early days, probably the biggest of the cause buttons were those related to labor unions and that sort of issue, as well as the question of prohibition. And they produced many, hundreds of different designs. There's even a whole history to postal buttons, as a matter of fact. The first postal button shows a mailman in his uniform next to a mailbox, given away with Cameo Pepsin gum.
Whether they convey your politics, champion a cause, simply tell a joke, or serve as a souvenir, these small tokens of your thoughts and interests are meant to be worn and shared with others.
So making a button is an effort. You have to think about your message, think about who's going to be wearing it, and what changes you want to see people to make. So they're kind of like the ultimate community builder. I do feel like buttons are a really important communication tool because we're not always talking about how we're feeling about things, but we can wear something that's really on our mind. It's like something that you physically have to stand behind, but also think about who you're going to be giving this to, because you want people to wear it, so you have to design it with them in mind too.
Each stamp features a single word as a central element of the design. You can get them now to add a cheery, whimsical flair to your cards and letters. We are pleased to present the 2024 Pinback Button stamps. They're available at USPS.com and post offices nationwide.